It's lovely to see you all. I'm David Micklem, and with Claire Doherty, I'm the co-programme director of Culture Reset, and it's fantastic to be here at our second assembly. As you know, Culture Reset was conceived and delivered at speed as a rapid response to the pandemic and the related conditions. And what was always clear was that dedicated, focused time to explore practice and process with peer support and stimulus would open up perspectives and push forward new thinking. In developing the programme, we wanted to try something new, to carve out a space between a completely self-led online learning environment and a structured programme of tuition, to create a programme which foregrounds a self-directed process of developing your own question, stimulated by peers, and facilitated workshops and commissioned content. In doing that, I hope we've enabled the opportunity for you to go deep, to develop breakthroughs and get challenges from colleagues, and to really explore a depth of thinking around your work and practice.
Hello, everybody. Now, we know that this has been done whilst the external conditions have increasingly applied extreme pressure to all participants involved. We've seen this intensify, particularly during the second half of the programme. So resetting your course within this kind of perpetual stormy sea continues to require extraordinary levels of tenacity and courage. Today, David and I want to share with you just a few early thoughts from watching what has resulted from 200 fellow producers working together despite these extreme conditions. And here's just a few insights from us. The past 6 months have revealed that change is both a kind of long-term commitment, but also requires radical action to move forward. We've noticed that this can sometimes feel like mutually exclusive approaches in the act of resetting. Do I advocate, collaborate, address the inequities of my institution or sector, playing the long game? But what then of new forms of creative practice? What space is left for making? But if I attempt to work on the radical creative act alone, am I ignoring the structural challenges we need to overcome? Our feeling from listening to you all is that creative producing is the act of holding these two things in tension at the same time. We might look to the way in which, for example, the toppling of the Colston statue in my home city of Bristol here was both a symbolic performative act, but also representative of 25 years at least of grassroots work to actively address systemic racism in this city. So both those things being held at the same time. We know that, as artist Oliver Eliasson has suggested, art does not show people what to do, yet it can make the world felt. And this felt feeling may spur thinking, engagement, and even action. So whilst the principles, the toolkits and strategies might be the structural work we need to reset our sector, we must not forget the ability of the work itself, however reimagined during a global pandemic, to show us things as if they might be different and to inspire change.
Two further reflections from me. The first about power and privilege. In many ways, given the political context in which we're all working, it's no surprise that notions of power and privilege have been central to the conversations that Claire and I have overheard. What perhaps has surprised us has been the consensus right from across both cohorts around the urgent need to change in terms of who gets a say in our art and culture. There's been widespread agreement around demands for radical change and rapid and radical change in the power structures that still dominate our sectors. And we've also recognised that these are complex and complicated issues to resolve. These are uncomfortable conversations for many of us who are beginning to acknowledge our privileges. Uncomfortable because there are participants on this programme who we know have experienced exclusion, and those of us that have contributed to this as well are on the programme. As unconscious biases become conscious, I know that I've started to question almost everything deeply and profoundly. We've heard talk of the need for arts leaders in positions of privilege to step aside, to better share space, to create more inclusive initiatives, to invite others in. And we've also heard that the sector needs to support these changes carefully, generously, so that we don't set others up to fail. Support structures at a governance and at an operational level need to change, and we've been hugely encouraged by some of the ways in which we've heard you commit to action around these changes. The notion of relinquishing power, giving it up, isn't the same as giving up. Recognizing the space that I and others like me occupy and stepping aside, not stepping away, is one of the most important lessons I'm taking away from this programme. I'm deeply compelled by participants who've stressed the importance of listening as producers, directors, curators, knowing when to listen and when to speak. And it's these qualities and attributes that have inspired our notion of the keynote listener, the role of individuals in positions of power as active listeners committed to reflecting back what they hear. And my second reflection is on physical and digital learning. One of the challenges of lockdown has been how to amplify our creative selves when our principal connections are online, like this. So how do we have better ideas on Zoom? What methods might we find for enabling breakthroughs in Slack? How easy is it to develop new thinking, doing what we're doing right now, staring at a screen? A central theme of the programme, in the content of the podcasts and where we've been told you're listening to them, has been how to embody creative thinking. Over the past 8 weeks, we've been encouraged by feedback that participants have been going for walks with podcasts, journaling on the move, talking on the phone while walking the dog or juggling childcare. We've heard that time to reflect in nature, with friends and family, or just to walk around the block or the local park or Lidl, have all contributed to some of the fresh ideas and solutions you've been developing. And crucially, talking to people you've never met before, people who are different to you. The pandemic has obviously accelerated our uses of new technologies to enable remote working and to maintain networks. And it's incredible. It still blows my mind that we can meet like this and share our ideas and our breakthroughs. And our screens have enabled so much throughout lockdown. And you fed back that our reliance on them has reduced opportunities to let our bodies get involved in ideas generation and problem solving. It's obvious to say that we're social animals, and arts and culture is often collaborative and always creative. And digital is an extraordinary tool. This is an extraordinary way of conversing with people that enables us to make and share dynamic and democratic ways. But the pandemic has also realized the limitations of this too. I know that I have better ideas walking around the park with a colleague on the phone or side by side, or wandering the markets of Brixton, and how that reminds me of what culture means to other people and gets me away from my screen and out of my bubble. Participants, many of you have reminded us of all this, the importance of connecting in other ways, of the value of nature and the built environment as a stimulus, and that the real world can be so much more creative than the virtual.
And a final initial insight from us. So we knew that all 192 participants of Culture Reset would already be predisposed to change making, but we hadn't realised to what extent. Participants, all of you, all of us, are already activists, actively involved in political and social justice to realise change within and outside your networks and your institutions. The civic role of arts and culture, advanced and championed by the Gulbenkian Foundation, is embedded deeper and transforming creative producing far more than we might have expected or known. However, we've also heard how lonely and how risky this work can be. David touched on the systemic inequities within the arts sector that are limiting the agency of the producer to realise radical change. And Kuli Tiari wrote on this yesterday in Arts Professional. We also know from the programme that the very nature of creative producing exposes producers to very particular pressures. Producers, and by that we're talking the widest sense of the term, are boundary riders of the art sector. Our process is essentially relational. We build relationships across sectors and consequently are directly intersecting with housing, social services, public health, education, rural and urban development, to mention just a few. This means that producers are navigating complex value systems and expectations beyond our sector. Perhaps you are doing that as the sole cultural institution in a small town, or a newly freelance producer unmoored from an organisation, or as a producer within an institution that is fighting for its survival. Addressing the isolation that is prevalent in producing is going to be fundamental if we are to realise the breakthroughs we are so capable of. So, broad, expansive and inclusive networks that connect up and legitimise our endeavours are crucial. They give us confidence. They give us safe spaces in which to recognise unlearning and learning we need to do. They challenge our assumptions and reaffirm our breakthroughs. And perhaps most importantly, they can hold complexity and difference and enable a spectrum of approaches which enrich rather than contract the sector. This is the work of the boundary rider, of the chaos pilot, the producers who can and will reset arts and culture. Thank you.